The ideal position in any business is one, meaning you're number one. So number one in a market controls the market. The easiest way to be number one in a market is to create a new market inside of an existing market that you can own. Most business people I know, they only read business books. Cool. Now, if I can read all the books you read, and then I can read some of the books you don't read, I have an advantage. The thing about innovation is you have to go against the grain. So you are going to be the unpopular opinion the day before you're the breakthrough, and then tomorrow you're the standard. If you want to be extraordinary, you have to be extraordinary. And so most people are looking for, hey, what's the ordinary way that I can put this together so it can be done?
And Jason's stuff works, and he gets hired by the biggest names in the industry. He's worked with Alex Hormozi. He's featured in Alex's books. He works with Dean Graziosi and the others that he mentioned, and so many more. And hopefully some of you guys could get to work with Jason too. But pick up his book. I've read his book, incredible. I'm going to read it again probably after this interview. In fact, this interview could be a book on its own. I think it could be a course that we're not going to put out on our podcast and then sell for a lot of money, because I bet we could sell it, especially Jason, if you pitch it for us.
Hell yeah.
But we have so much more to talk about. All right, welcome back to the Amazing Marketing Show. I'm Dmitry Smirnov here with my co-host Chris Gray. Chris, what's going on?
Dmitry, what up?
Living the dream, man, and excited to introduce our guest, Jason Fladlien. You're known by many as the $250 million webinar man and the co-founder of Driven Mastermind. But please, if you could introduce yourself in your own words, how would you describe who you are and what you do?
Oh my God. I mean, I think of myself as a strategist, gentlemen, and webinars are the output of a lot of my strategy. It's not my only output. It's the one we go to the most, though. But to me, it's strategy first, offer second, and then the media third, whether that's a webinar or whatever the vehicle is to try to make that sell.
Jason, what is one thing that most people get wrong about webinars?
Oh my God. They overvalue the media itself. So if you don't have a good offer and you don't have the right audience, webinar is not going to save you. So a lot of people think that the webinar is better than it is. And then on the flip side, guys, some people think the webinar is dead because it's not as popular anymore as it used to be. People generally in business, they look for an edge, specifically a thing that they don't have to be good at and get a good result with. Which here's what's interesting about that. Those things sometimes appear. So occasionally you'll fall backwards into or you'll stumble over some sort of thing while just being there is enough. So in the old days, because we used to do a lot of Amazon stuff, just having a product on Amazon was almost sufficient in and of itself. You didn't have to be that good. You didn't have to have that much strategy. You just had to be there. So once upon a time, webinars was that thing. You just had to do them. You didn't even have to be good at them, and you could get a result with them. Nowadays, you got to be good at them. Like it's like YouTube, same thing. You have to be really good if you're going to get any leverage going on YouTube. And every media channel worth being in eventually goes through that evolution because it's so valuable to be in. That technique keeps getting refined because the stakes are so high. And then the people that can't keep up with the technique, they get frustrated, they quit it, and then they think it doesn't work just because they can't work it.
Yeah, well, you heard it here first. The webinar is dead, says Jason Fladlien. But it is pretty interesting that in the first two questions that we asked, you're actually saying webinars are not that important. So it's actually the strategy. So maybe let's talk about strategy. What's the important thing for us to know about strategy?
Yeah, so I think of it like this. I want to be able to have leverage, and leverage typically means that I have some sort of advantage over other people in the market. So using webinars as the example, I've always spoke in front of audiences and felt very comfortable about it. I was rapping in front of crowds when I was like 7 years old. Like being in front of an audience is easier than being in the audience for me. So I have an advantage. So webinars lend themselves to that advantage by me just feeling good presenting in front of people. I love to teach. It's a passion of mine. So part of a webinar is one of its benefits is you can sell and train at the same time. Usually you can do one or the other. So it's efficient. I like to sell and I like to train. So these are advantages I already have or can easily develop that I can then deploy on a webinar space. So this is kind of to keep on the subject of webinars. This is how this looks. But if you take a step back, when I work with marketers, when we publish them or we do the marketing for them, I kind of take the Warren Buffett approach, which is I'd rather step over a 1 foot hurdle than jump over a 10 foot hurdle. I would rather get great companies at good prices versus good companies at great prices. That sort of philosophy. So my favorite advantage is where is there leverage in the market where we don't have to be awesome to get a result? We just have to be good, and then the result we get can be leveraged. So when I think of that strategically, like the biggest campaign I ever did, guys, we did a $57 million launch in 226 days. And the number one reason I took that on, because we published a company that had the result and we marketed it, was because I could tell a story. So we could create the story in the marketing as it unfolded. And I saw the opportunity to do that. And that's different than a promotion. Promotions are whatever. We do those most of the time, but occasionally you can create a story inside of your market in real time. And I'm patient, so I turn down 9 or 10 or 15 potential deals so I can be ready for that one deal when it emerges. And they don't emerge very often, but when they do, you get behind them and then you get the most out of them as you possibly can. So that's some of the many, many facets of how I look at strategy.
Man, Jason, I told you before, you remind me, you are like the black version, or you are the black version.
Nice.
My homeboy is the black version of you. He's my business partner, and, and mentor when I started. And he told me when I first got in the game, one of the best things is leverage, some kind of strategic advantage. So when you said that again, another further proof of the comment I made. Let's get to the rapping thing because I find this
Mhm.
interesting.
Yep.
When Jason is really good, for those who don't know, he's really good at pitching. So obviously with the webinar and writing and all that, very good. But even just off of his head, if you give him something, he can pitch. Almost like I told you, Jason, similar to the guy Harry Mack, who just walks up to people and starts
Yeah.
freestyling. You give him words, he starts freestyling. Same thing with you with pitching. So my question is, I'm not sure if it played any kind of role, but when you were writing in hip hop and trying to rap, how did that influence your ability to write webinars or even pitch off the top of your head?
I'm sure it helped a lot because, I mean, we did a lot of freestyling. So yeah, there you just learn to think extemporaneously. That's a muscle that you've flexed and practiced, and I've probably done 1,000+ hours of freestyle. Not as good as Harry Mack, nowhere close, but that helps. Performing on stages, I performed guys in some of the craziest, stupid scenarios you can ever imagine. I would take any gig when I was rapping that paid. My attitude was like, I need to make money. So I'll go anywhere. I could tell you stories. The worst one was we pulled up to this bar and they had a bait vending machine out front. So instead of like getting a Pepsi from the vending machine, you could get like crawdads and go fishing down
All
the.
right, we're in the South.
I mean, we're in the Midwest, but same thing, man.
Yeah.
That's not a crowd you're going to very easily win over, but you figured out how to win them over. So I think that helped tremendously, but I also wrote a lot. So I would write a lot of raps. I would fill up notebooks full of raps. So writing was a very normalized experience for me from as far back as I can remember. So then sitting down to write webinars and other persuasion, sales copy, that kind of stuff, it just was a natural extension of sitting and writing. A lot of people struggle with writing and they get into this business. And again, that was an advantage I had. I could just write. So being in front of crowds, writing, being extemporaneous, all of these are axes that I had sharpened long before I knew what tree to cut down.
Hmm.
There, Yeah, I mean, Jason, we can drop a beat right now and see what
Please
happens.
do not.
We've heard you speak so many times, but never with a beat in the background. In fact, that's probably something we should ask the Driven Mastermind to put together. Like he's gonna come up for his presentation, but instead of his slides, can we get some rap? I mean, is there anything on YouTube, anything we can see where you're rapping, especially?
I will not show you. It is out there. Occasionally somebody finds it. But I try not to have it be known.
Well, we're gonna have to look
Jason,
up, yeah, figure out your stage name. We're gonna find it. Someone will.
how did you we've talked about it a bit before, but guys, Jason's not just talking about rap like he's rapping for fun. Like Jason really knows his shit when it comes to hip hop. I consider myself a connoisseur, even from lyrics to cadence to this, that, and the other. And Jason can go one to one with me. So where did this I know, but from what you want to share, where did this deep
Sure.
love of rap and hip hop come from?
Yeah, a couple things. So first of all, my brain just moves so fast. I learned when I was like 35 that I had ADHD, and I was like, oh wow, that's useful to know. I never knew that before. So normal music didn't move fast enough for me. I always liked hip hop because there was so many words, and I would just get into the words. I could relate somewhat culturally to hip hop because, I grew up in an environment where drugs were a thing and people sold drugs and people did drugs. And there was I was a white kid from Iowa, and there was only two black kids in my school, Chris, and they were literally from Africa. They were foreign exchange students, so it wasn't like we had this cultural diversity there. But yet at the same time, there was no other music that was talking about, selling drugs and was talking about what that was like and that experience growing up in that. So for me, as close as I could relate to that, hip hop was the only one that made me realize that. And my only experience with cops guys was when they were doing things to people that I loved that I didn't really appreciate. As far as I could tell, the cops were as crooked as the criminals were, at least in my personal experience growing up. So, like, you hear hip hop music, you hear F the Police by NWA, and you're like, yeah, that tracks. To me, like I'm white boy from Iowa. I'm like, I understand that. And also at the same time, like it was so cool and it was such a different experience than everything that was out there. And I've always been a contrarian. So I have never followed the normal path ever in my life. So you start checking all those boxes, ticking them off. It makes sense. But yeah, I'm an old head in the game of hip hop. I don't know much of the newer stuff, a little bit of it, but yeah, it was the first music that I ever really liked.
And then really quick, the thing that I've noticed too, you said with hip hop, the challenge is, they're dropping these lyrics and these 16s, and it's happening so fast that it's hard to appreciate what that individual said. Yet I notice if you go, let's go back to the webinars. In your webinars, you can make it happen fast, but then you could still slow it down even by just one word per slide, so they can understand what you say. And so, how did you transition from just bob 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 to still having a good pace, but making sure that the crowd can keep up with what you're putting down?
Yeah, well, that one was hard because I would be fast paced, which is not a bad strategy when you're communicating because if people find what you say interesting and they struggle to keep up, they will stay attuned. They will listen. When you get better at it, you find that varying tonality, delivering, pacing, all of those things are valuable, and confidence comes from the person that speaks really slow. So there's some sort of status and authority when you slow down your speech. But there's always levels to this. So you learn one thing and it works good. And you say, now that I mastered this thing, what can I build on top of it? So then you learn the next thing. Guys, it was like, it shocked me when I realized that most people don't even pay attention to the lyrics of any song. They just like the
Mhm.
beat and it's background noise for them. So
Yep.
they don't care about hip hop because they don't even listen to the lyrics. I was always into the word, so that also works for webinars because webinars for me is such a precision of what language and wording we're going to use. So I started emphasizing and just focusing on the words and then picked up the delivery along the way. But I mean, it's the same thing. Like when we rapped, it's like there's so many flows that you could come up with. I mean, at one point in time, there wasn't that triplet flow that then became all the rage in hip hop. That was a new flow that broke onto the scene. But you would experiment with different flows when you would rap, and you'd like, damn, if I did it like this, I could do it, then this is how it hits. If I do it like this, then it hits this way. And I always thought that was really cool. Like a Bone Thugs and Harmony flow when it came out. It was like,
Yeah.
what is this? You never even heard it before. And it was just devastating. And I grew up in the Midwest, guys, so there was no Midwest hip hop scene. So I would be like, East Coast, awesome. West Coast, sure. Down South, yeah, why not? I didn't have any loyalty to any region because none of the stuff come out of my region. So I got to hear all the different flows from all the different places, and we would just experiment and play with them and see what we could come up with. So again, that translates into marketing in a way that I think, is unique for me. But I remember, Dimitri, you and I were on a boat in Mexico.
Yeah, yes, we were.
That's a funny way to start a conversation. Yeah, but we were at the Driven getaway in Tulum there, and you and I were talking, and I was saying to you how on the hierarchy of what matters, like the specific words you use are way down the list. Like you got to
Mhm.
have the story, you got to have the emotion that you want to have hit for the audience. And then once you nail that, then you can add in the next layer and the next layer and the next layer. So like delivery and all that kind of stuff, that is secondary. Like first, you got to have something worth saying. That is more important than how you say it. But then once you have something worth saying, then how you say it becomes very important.
And that goes back to the offer. The offer has to be good. And I want to come back to how to actually pick a good offer. I mean, you mentioned there has to be advantages. I want to figure out those advantages. But first, all the stuff that you just mentioned remind me of that song, Hook by Blues Traveler. You guys know that one? It goes, it doesn't matter what I
Oh
say so
yeah.
long as I sing with inflection. And I was like, that's so true. It doesn't matter what the lyrics are, and it doesn't matter what your presentation is. The other thing is like West Coast, East Coast rap and stuff. Well, I'm gonna say there's a West Coast, East Coast marketing style. I'm gonna represent the East Coast coming from DC right now. So,
Oh
um,
yeah.
and by the way, I mean the Midwest in the '90s, at least when I was coming up, there was the St. Louis scene. Maybe that was too late.
Yeah, yeah,
Nelly and
And
right,
Nelly and those guys, yeah.
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 Chingy.
So that Chingy, yeah, some
Yeah.
quality stuff
Chingy.
coming out of there.
He was more of a
The
drive-by.
Holiday Inn.
Yeah, he was, but he was there. Yeah, he was there
Yeah, he
for a
was
little
there.
bit.
Okay, so back to advantages, because okay, in theory, yes, we want to have the advantage, and that's where we want to play our game. But I mean, how do we actually find it? How do we identify it? You know how you identify yours, but how does somebody figure that out?
Yep, that's a good question. So, I mean, at the highest level, supply and demand dictate everything. So the more something is in demand and the less supply of it there is, the higher the value for it. So then that means the easier it is to sell, the more you can charge, the more money you can make, the bigger the potential there, depending on market size, all that kind of stuff. So you want to be able to have this uh, the ideal position in any business is one, meaning you're number one. So number one in a market controls the market. Pretty much number two has to dictate their strategy based on what number one won't do. So, Coca-Cola owns the market, and so Pepsi never can compete head on with Coke. It will always lose. Apple owns the market for tablets, iPads. So you can't do what Apple does. And you just run down the line in these mature markets, as we call them. Number one sets the tone for the market. They typically take up 60 to 80% of the profits in that market. Number two has to be counter number one, be the opposite of number one, essentially. So their strategy is dictated by number one. And then number three through whatever,
Mm.
they don't really exist long term. So what you want to do is you want to be number one in a market. And the easiest way to be number one in a market is to create a new market inside of an existing market that you can own. Because then you're number one by default because you're the only one in the market. Now that's easier said than done, but it's this thing that I solve for more than anything. So I accidentally did this when I got started, guys. My first product I ever created was an ebook on how to write articles faster. Because everybody was writing articles back then. This is 2007. So article marketing was a big strategy. It's like the equivalent of social media posting these days. Everybody was doing article marketing. They were trying to do it to make money. And I developed one single skill set of just writing faster articles, not better articles, not articles that made you more money per se. Just taking if you wrote 30 minutes, I could get you down to 15. So I carved out a market inside of a market that I was the only one that could occupy. Now, that is my supply. Is there a demand for it?
Mm.
And that's always the wild card. You don't know if there is or isn't. So I'm a huge fan of beta testing markets. So this is one of the strategic leverages that I use. I want to know if there's a demand or not as fast as humanly possible with the least amount of time, the least amount of money, the least amount of risk. So how do I test a market quickly to validate if there is demand or not? So pick a market to be number one in, and then validate it quickly to see if the demand is there. So we're the only supplier, and if they're there, they have the most demand. That is so monstrous because then we can be number one. And by the time number two comes in, we are already ahead of them. We have more momentum than them. We have more leverage than them. And typically the bigger players, they won't go into those markets because they're too small for those guys. So, notice it was a $4 ebook, guys. It wasn't like I was saying like you have to come up with the most fanciest, most expensive, most craziest offer possible. Um, the number one thing is just to be number one. So then once you're in there, what's really cool is on that first sell, I discovered a couple things I didn't know before. One of them was that on these really short products that I created, because it was only a 6-page ebook, people would buy the product, 20 minutes later, report back in and say, hey, I've already gotten my money's worth. And
Mm.
even today, that's rare, but back then that was like a unicorn. It didn't happen. So all these people were like, whoa, I bought a product and immediately got more than my money's worth. That is uncommon. That is rare. So that's now another strategic advantage I have. I can engineer fast results. And I've noticed the market values a small, fast result that happens like right away over a bigger result that may or may not happen in the future. So that's a little bit of insight. Okay, how do I put that into the next product? I've also now gotten trust. So I now have a market that will look to me for other solutions because their past experience was very positive with me. They were literally guys asking me, you got anything else?
Hmm.
Can I buy something else from you? That's a pretty good advantage. So you have an inbuilt test audience that you can play with now. And then the other thing is I got proof. I can say, listen, when I teach stuff, people get good results. Why should you believe me? Well, look over there. Look at all those people that got a good result. So that was an additional leverage point that I had accomplished by launching something like that. So how do we test markets quickly, fastly, efficiently, try to find markets that other people have looked over or underserving? One of my favorite things, guys, to look for is where are people buying products that are not very good and they know they're not very good? Because that shows me buyer intent. They're having to settle. They're like, yeah, this thing sucks. Here's my money anyway because it's better than nothing. Those are my favorite markets to go into because we know they're buying and we know that they're willing to buy inferior products. So this is a green light for us to go in and really disrupt those markets.
Now, some people say that everything is saturated. There's nowhere to go at this point. It's 2025 and AI is taking over and I can't do anything. What do you say to them?
I say to them, it sounds like you got it all figured out. Peace. Yeah, I mean, there's more opportunity in 2025 than there has ever been at any point in history. That is just, it's obvious. And any metric that you measure it, that will ring true. Just in AI alone, let's say there's probably several hundred markets that have been created overnight. None of them have been claimed yet. I have never seen a proliferation of new markets emerge before my very eyes faster at any point in history than now. It's insane. So it's crazy for me. This is like somebody standing in front of a pile of gold saying there's no more money. Like this is obviously a mindset issue because what when they say things like that, what they're really saying is I see more and more people succeed and I'm not one of them. So they feel like there's no opportunity left. Or they feel like people are beating them to the punch, which very well may be a thing. I get it. There's a lot of change right now. Anytime there's change, there's an upside of opportunity. The more things change, the more opportunities emerge. However, the more chaotic it is. And so the chaos is scary, and some people get overwhelmed by the chaos. So if you can manage the chaos, you will find more opportunity than any point in history.
I am loving this shit so far. The thing I like about this, and I have a comment and a question. When Dimitri, we've talked about this. I have an appreciation for things done at a high level, and when they're done at a high level, they look simple. So whether it's I'm watching a guy in jiu-jitsu who's whatever, killer, and making it look easy when it's not, or basketball or football, somebody's doing these things and they make it look easy. That means they're really good. But also they're doing it. If you ask them, well, how did you do that? Or blah, 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 they can't tell you. This is happening at a subconscious level, which it's a deeper level of understanding. So when you're sitting here dropping all these marketing gems that you just dropped in the last 5 to 10 minutes, like you were talking about that effortlessly, there's some game in what you
Yeah.
just said. So I'm appreciating that. And then you talked about mindset, which I love because some of my favorite work that you've done, which I don't really hear you talk about, is your work that you did on schemas. I'm not even sure if it's still out there. If it's still out there, look for Jason's shit
Yeah.
on schemas. It's beautiful because with the mindset, that same person who's looking at the pile of gold, with that mindset, you could say, hey, do 1, 2, and 3, and you will have all that gold. But if they have the wrong mindset and the wrong schema, operating from the wrong place, then they won't get that gold. And so please tell us a little. I want to know more about how you got in so depth or so deep into schemas, and please let the audience know what schemas are for those who aren't aware.
Yeah, this is good. So once upon a time, I created this podcast. I was all hyped up on it. I did like 3 episodes and then I quit. And every so often, somebody like you, Chris, will be like, God, schemas, that long lost podcast, and they'll geek out on it because this stuff is so cerebral and so dense, and the market, trust me, guys, doesn't want it as a whole. Uh, so it's kind of why I walked away from it. So a schema is essentially just the way that you classify the world. So the classic example is this. You have a little kid, you bring a dog over and you say, this is a dog. Kid looks at it and say, okay, has 4 legs, ears, and a tail and is hairy. That's all dogs. And then it sees a smaller dog. So it might see this big German Shepherd and this little Chihuahua, and you say, that's also a dog. And they go, oh, okay. So the commonality is 4 legs, ears, and a tail, but size isn't necessarily a commonality of classification. And then they see a donkey, and then they point and they say dog. And they go, no, 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 that's a donkey. And you're like, well, that's got ears and tail and a legs, and it's got hair too. So, but it's different. It's a different
Mhm.
schema, if you will, of classification. And so when we go through the world, the way in which we view the world is through these classifications of different schemas. So I'll give you another cool example with schemas that they find out when they've tested this psychologically is if somebody will come up and they will ask for your order at a restaurant, and then they will say something completely ridiculous, like something so outlandish and left field. I can't remember the specific quote from the research that I was reading, but it would be something like insane, like, "Hey, have you ever had your head, drilled open and cracked open before?" And then they'll just go on. And then at the end, when they go and get the check, somebody will follow up and say, hey, did you remember anything unusual that happened in that conversation? And most people will say no, because the comment is so far outside of their schema of what they were expecting in a normal interaction that they literally are amnesic to it. And so if your schema of the world is bad things happen to good people, and so therefore, if that's the case, then there is no God, then anything that will fall outside of that schema, you will either delete it, you won't remember it, or you will find a way to invalidate it. You'll say, well, yeah, but dot, dot, dot. So anytime there's trauma or anytime there's limitation, there's what we call a maladaptive schema. That means that the schema wasn't properly formed. And so until you reform the schema, that limitation of behavior will persist. So if somebody has a schema that's related to money and that the more they see other people succeed, the less is likely they'll succeed, then they will never get past that until they readjust their schema. So that's what schemas are. Now, how did I figure this out? Because I'm insane, and what I do is I'm always looking for an advantage or an edge in market. So here's the problem, guys, with most business people I know, they only read business books. Cool. Now, if I can read all the books you read, and then I can read some of the books you don't read, I have an advantage. And if I read, and you guys know this to be true, you read 100 business books on a subject, you really read 3 business books, 70 times. Like it's the same stuff with different titles and covers. Um, it's profound the first time you hear it, but not the 10th time. There's not that, there's only so many things you can say in business. But if you look at it from a different perspective, so if you go in and like study hypnotism, like I did, that gives you a whole new perspective on persuasion. And then if you go in and you study linguistics, which I did, then that gives you yet a different perspective. So I started studying psychology, and I started studying different fields of psychiatry. So when patients come in that are all messed up, what are the different fields of psychiatry that help people? Because you can help somebody who's afraid to leave their house, then you could certainly help somebody who's trying to take their business from 6 figures to 7 figures. Like that limitation is a lot easier to deal with than agoraphobia would be, right? So that's why I started studying all this stuff, is to figure out and draw from different industries and then take them and apply those models in the business industry. And most people do not do that. So this gives me an advantage.
I love this because it backs up one of my favorite quotes. Um, a problem cannot be solved at the level of consciousness that created it, right? So shout out to Einstein. So then let's go back to that person looking at the money, the gold in front of them, but their schema is all messed up. What are a couple things, if any, that you could give somebody in general to break a schema or
Yeah.
change their level of consciousness?
Yeah, I mean, you first got to understand how they form that belief. Like what is causing them to come to that conclusion? So we call this the model of reality. So what is their model of reality? How do they form it? And we either can step into it and do some interior redecorating, which is fun, or we can collapse the model of reality onto itself. So therefore it no longer exists. Uh, that's my preferable route. So the classic example that I'll give is, I'll never forget this. I was in a seminar one time and I was speaking on the stage, and a guy in the audience says, "Hey, Jason, how do I really succeed? I've been working in business for a long time, but I don't really feel like I have succeeded yet." So I said to him, I said, "Well, what does success look like to you from a monetary standpoint?" And he goes, $50,000 a month. And I looked at him, and I don't know how I picked up on this, probably because I've done this a few thousand times. So like intuitively, I could take a look at everything that he represented, and I could see what was happening. He was making his goal too big, he couldn't obtain it, and then he was giving up because he was feeling like a failure, right? So this is what I said to him. I said, "You're not ready for $50,000 yet." So instead of how do you succeed and make
Mm.
$50,000, I told him, I go, how can you fail your way to $10,000? Because you're not ready yet to succeed at $50,000 level. And then I saw his understanding. He goes, I could see he got it. And then I said, don't tell me the answer. Don't share it with anybody. Keep it to yourself. And he says, I will. And he had the biggest smile he ever had on his face because I reframed what was going on there. What he really needed was momentum. I could just tell. I could just sense it. This guy was starting and stopping and starting and stopping and not getting anywhere. Now, what was really cool about this is I put what's called a double bind on him. If he makes $50,000, then he's succeeded. So he might mess around, try to make 10 and get 50. That's a possibility. But either way, if he fails and gets 10 or if he succeeds and gets 50, he ultimately succeeds because he now has results when he couldn't get results before. And the coolest thing about this is, and everybody else is in the seminar staring at us, and they're kind of frustrated because they're like, well, what's the secret? What's the answer? By not allowing him to say it out loud and keeping it to himself, the only way that he can demonstrate it is to actually do it. So I collapsed his model of reality. He could no longer go back to the old way of thinking because I broke the capabilities for him to look at that problem the same way ever again in his life. So that's a lot more complicated to do, breaking a model of reality like that. But it's easier if you just get that person to doubt their belief. They don't have to necessarily disagree with it, and they don't have to agree with your belief. They just have to doubt their own belief. So I was joking earlier, but that's a technique when somebody says, "Oh, Jason, I can't do it." Okay, I'm done. Then what can I do to help you? You already know you can't do it. Like, sorry, I guess you got it all figured out. And I'm inserting doubt in their own beliefs. I'm getting them to doubt their own belief. Guys, I can't tell you how many times somebody comes up to me and says, "Jason, I lack confidence." And my question back to them is, "How confident are you in that statement?" And they're like, because you can't simultaneously be confident in that statement and lack confidence. You just can't do it, right? So you break beliefs by inserting little doubts into them. And if you directly challenge somebody, that's the worst way to do it. Uh, because you generally will meet with resistance. If somebody says, "I can't do it," and you say, "Yes, you can," you are misaligned with them. You are out of rapport with them. They will feel like you don't understand them because in their world, they can't do it. So if you invalidate their world, they will invalidate you. So the worst thing you can do in most instances, there are some exceptions, but in most instances, the worst thing you can do is tell somebody they can't do something, or tell somebody they can do something that they just told you they can't. So that's why when somebody says to me, "Jason, it's too expensive, I can't afford it," I say, "You're right, you can't afford it, but you can't afford the opposite either, right? You can't
Hmm.
afford either scenario. So which scenario that you can't afford are you going to move forward with, right? Like, I know you can't afford it. Like, we know you can't afford it, but do you want it anyway? Yeah, I want it anyway. Okay, so how do we get it?"
That's so fun that Jason's getting the sale by breaking the brains. It's like
The
this
brain is
brain needs to be.
overrated anyway, man, I'll tell you.
Yes.
Well, this is interesting because it fulfills the prophecy of our catchphrase of the show that marketing is in everything and everything is marketing. And I guess it really comes down to psychology and mindset. And it's so interesting. A lot of the clients that I've worked with in my agency that have done big things and sold certifications, they have, certification for that, certification for this. They have 3-day event, 6-hour course, whatever. But 80% of the time, they're focused on their client's mindset.
Yep.
So they're timing. It's not even about really what they're selling, although it is because you have to have a good offer, like you mentioned. But then the mindset is the only way to actually get them to do the thing that you want them to do.
Before I start diving into this, Dimitri, you're the keeper of time. Where are we at right now? How are we doing,
Yeah,
brother?
we still have. I think we have another 10 minutes or so, 5, 10 minutes.
Yeah,
Man.
yeah, let's go.
So Jason, you already dove into something else that I really appreciate, and I noticed that you do, whether it's in a casual conversation like this or whether it's from stage, you are good with NLP or hypnotic language. One of the best I've seen. I got into it when I was trying to pick up girls, right? That's where I got my introduction. But it's so much bigger than that, right? So much bigger than that, and you are
Oh,
a ninja with it, like you've already done in this conversation. Again, it's happening at a subconscious level. And so, my question is, where did that come from? What were your biggest influences or best books? What got you so
yeah.
good at that, other than the practice?
So I had a call with Ross Jeffries yesterday. I don't know if you
Yeah,
know that name.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah.
legend of the space.
Hmm.
We were talking about a sales call. It's like he wanted to know how to sell a product in a different space, but he's an old school pickup artist, one of the first guys ever.
Yep.
And we were talking a lot about NLP. So I got into NLP because I had all these panic attacks and I had all this anxiety in my life that was a result of the trauma that I had growing up. So I got into it to try to, operate on my own brain, so to speak. And I didn't really work that well for that. It's hard to do it on yourself, but I'm like, while I'm in there trying to heal myself, I'm like, oh, here's a little cool sales thing. Oh, I could use this thing if I'm communicating it with somebody. So I broke in to steal the jewels and I got something better. That's where I picked up on it. And I was never a certified NLP guy. I still have never certified, but I learned the concept early on about modeling an NLP. Like the theory is if you truly could elicit somebody's decision-making strategy and you knew how they did what they did, not how they said what they did, but NLP is really good at uncovering and creating models, then you could the fastest way possible to get the result is to build a model that replicates how that person gets that result. So that was fascinating to me. So I heard that early on, and I'm like, well, one of the co-creators of NLP is Richard Bandler, so why don't I just model him? So instead of studying the materials that they taught directly, I did some of that. I just started modeling him. So I would just listen to every single thing of his that I could get my hands on and that I could find, and I would just memorize it. A lot of what I did, guys, actually in every field is memorization. I would hear some really cool stuff by one individual, and I would just listen to it till I had it memorized. And that worked because it not only did I learn that specific technique, which was the least of it, but then I started being able to take it apart, build it up, play with it, see insights from it. I would take the micro of it and then apply it on a macro scale. So I would mostly listen to Bandler. And, then where did NLP come from? It came from really essentially three people that they modeled. One of them was Milton Erickson. So then I started studying Milton Erickson, who was this crazy hypnotist who did things that everybody thought was impossible. So I would go and I would find these books on eBay, like these rare books of Erickson's, that these very technical papers, research papers that he would write, and anything I could on him. So I would read all that as well. So you start picking all this stuff up, and there's a lot of mixture of hypnosis and NLP and modeling. But that's kind of where I picked it up from. So like the model of reality, that was something that I learned in NLP, is you learn how somebody's figures out the world and makes decisions in it. And then if you can step into it and understand how they make decisions, you can influence the decisions that they make. And then you get into the language stuff too, which is a whole different aspect, because the other creator of NLP, he was a linguist. So John Grinder was a linguist. And so you get that with it as well, which is fascinating, because then you learn different language patterns that can have uh, a profound impact on somebody. So one of my favorite things, I was just joking. So Eli Wild and I, we just started a podcast. We haven't published it yet, but he is hardcore. Used to be Tony Robbins' top sales guy, so he studied all Tony stuff. Tony comes from NLP too, and we were. He was talking the other day because he posted something about, a lot of people ask him, is this ethical? When using these different persuasive frameworks and stuff like that, it feels very manipulative. So therefore, is it ethical? And he was trying to answer it directly, which is not, in my opinion, the best way to answer that question. So I jokingly responded back with, as a child, my father would ask me about a questions of ethics because he heard a story of these two young men that once upon a time, and then dot dot dot. That was my comment, right? So in NLP, this is a nested story. This is a story inside of a story inside of a story. So when you do a nested story loop in NLP, the frame of reference cannot be tracked anymore. This is a confusion pattern. If you put somebody in a state of confusion, what happens is beautiful. They no longer can hold on to these beliefs, whether they serve them or not. And they especially can't hold on to these limiting factors because they're too confused to go through the normal process, the pattern that they would run when something happens. So the pattern gets interrupted. And then they're able to place themselves inside of that story, or in this case, multiple stories, and then they can hear it. So instead of directly answering that question, which is a very charged question of ethics, you tell a story about a time when a person was facing an ethical dilemma and how they were able to solve it utilizing some of the same strategies, but you do it as a story inside of a story inside of a story. And guys, this is not like new. Like if you really pause and you look underneath the carpet of what's going on, this happens all the time. Like classic story writing, if you're watching a television show, is they have an A story and a B story. So they start telling part of the A story with the main characters, and then they have a side story with the B characters. And then if it's really good, like a Seinfeld or like a Curb Your Enthusiasm, which are two of the most successful shows of all time, then those congeal together at the end. The A story and the B story collide. And that is exquisite when that happens. It doesn't have to happen, but it's the same kind of concept of how you could communicate. So indirect or more subtle communication in order to make a point, to persuade. This is the kind of stuff, guys, I just absolutely love. It's so fascinating because it all goes back to the consumer psychology and how people make decisions.
Dimitri, one of the best I've seen other than Jason was Seth Daly. Seth is a real estate guy, front row dad, dude, love him to death. And I watched him. He'll be on the phone or whatever it is, and he's like, some of my best customers will do one or two things, and then it's beautiful, right? And so,
Brilliant.
one quick question to you. I know we don't have much of time, but and this might be a longer question, but my point is there any other example of NLP besides like double bind or something simple that our
Yeah.
audience might be able to take away from you today? A simple use of it, a simple way to employ it.
Yeah, that's a good question. My favorite thing about NLP that I learned, I don't know if this is a classic NLP term, but this concept of frames in a frame control. So
Yeah.
everything has a content and a context, and we tend to overemphasize the content. I tend to focus more on the context. So the frame around the Mona Lisa, if we're going to take that quite literally. Like if we put duct tape around her instead of an ornate frame, it don't hit the same. And if we take her out of the Louvre and we put her in a dark abandoned warehouse, in some scary location, it's not going to have the same appeal, even though it's literally the same exact painting. So the painting is the content. Where the painting is hanging and how it's framed is the context. So the same person that is scrolling through social media versus reading the email, it's the same person, different context. That's going to have a drastically different impact on how they're going to take in whatever message that you put in front of them. So the number one thing that I do is before I make a point, if I'm selling or if I'm communicating in a coaching environment, is I set it up. I set it up with the proper context. I ask myself this question: what is the most powerful emotional state someone can be in to be most receptive to the point that I'm about to make? That's the framing of it. So one of the things that I do that is very unique in how I sell versus many other people is anger is one of the strongest energetic forces that you can possibly leverage. And so oftentimes before I sell somebody a product, I get them so pissed off at who they are right now and the limitations they have. So they'll do anything they can to get out of that experience. Like I want them to run away from who they are right now that limits them as fast as possible. And if I give them something to run to, my product, that's an easier change than positive affirmations. And it's an easier change than saying, hey, you got this and we're going to do this together. And it's easier than being nice to them. I will break rapport with them if I have to, because I want them to get so upset with their current situation that they'll do anything that they can to change it, including and usually specifically buying the very product that will most help them change that situation.
Jason, one of our favorite segments that we do is the Man in the Arena segment. And you are a man in the arena, and that comes with its wins, but also often its losses and black eyes and bloody lips. Is there anything that stands out for you in your career where it just took a big L and then maybe overcame it, hopefully?
I mean, a lot of them, right? Oh, Jesus. I lose more than I win, guys. It's not a uncommon thing if you're trying to push the envelope. It's just the losses nobody remembers. In the wins, you don't even need that many of them for people to talk about them when you can set like the most unbelievable records that you can ever imagine. My biggest losses have always been I've never marketed myself as much as I've marketed the products and other people. It's ironic, but I guess it makes sense. Um, if I would have built more of the personal brand and if I would have protected it and developed it and grown it, I would be probably 10 times richer than I am right now and reach 100 times more people, 100x more people than I reach right now. So those are the biggest L's that I took was being too focused on the outcome specifically and not looking at the bigger picture. I started a YouTube channel in 2006 and then I walked away. I was too soon to it. I told we were building a shopping cart once upon a time, and I said we should take Bitcoin, and the year was 2013, and then we're like, haha, yeah, Bitcoin, whatever. Um, I tend to be too ahead of the market. So even on a good idea, I get there first, it falls apart, and then I say screw it and I move on. So, with webinars, certainly should have just totally dominated that category to the degree that I didn't, other than being the best at it. But like, I don't have the number one selling software in it. I don't have an agency that develops those for clients and none of that kind of stuff, because I I was just so focused on let's get really good at webinars and help people. And I didn't look further past that because when I first started to try to do webinar marketing, nobody wanted to buy it because it was ahead of the market. So time and time and time again, my biggest mistake that I make is getting there too soon and then moving past it. And then somebody comes by later and crushes it because they waited just a little bit longer when the time was right. So it's the curse of intelligence, of seeing things ahead of when you should be able to see them. Yeah, it's a gift too. But yeah, I've made that mistake many times. When we were crushing it in the Amazon days, we were killing it. We were just so happy helping people succeed and win. I never stopped and think, how do we take the personal branding for here? How do we create IP from here that scales? I'm terrible at scaling. I still don't quite understand it, but I'm still out here 17 years later, trying to figure stuff out, and I can invest the last 16 years into the next one. But yeah, I've got my ass kicked, guys, too many times to count.
Well, something that you posted, I think maybe on TikTok, it was if you're exceptional, you're gonna ruffle some feathers. So,
Yeah.
I guess how you're gonna keep ruffling feathers now moving forward?
I don't try to, right? It's not, I don't intentionally go out there to create the controversy. But I stand for my stand. So you don't have to like it. If I believe in it, then that's what it is. And I'm certainly, the thing about innovation is you have to go against the grain. So you are going to be the unpopular opinion the day before you're the breakthrough, and then tomorrow you're the standard. And you
Hmm.
just have to accept that that's your fate if that's who you are. And that's who I am. So I'm always going to figure out things that are unconventional. If you want to be extraordinary, you have to be extraordinary. And so most people are looking for, hey, what's the ordinary way that I can put this together so it can be done? And I have to be extraordinary. So I have to do something extra or different. And so that will always be contrarian. And guys, this cost me a lot. I'll tell you the biggest L, another big L I played is I was not that political. I was zero politics. Now I'm like 2% politics. At least it's on the radar. I would sit there and be like, why aren't they putting me on the stage? I am literally the best in the world at this thing, but some guy who's the 29th best in the world is getting it on there. And then you figured it out. It's because, he sent this guy a gift basket when his son was born. And I'm like, shit, I must be autistic because I don't think about these kind of things, like socially, that kind of stuff. Or, he bigged him up one day in front of an audience and gave him credit. Like, guys, I used to tell like the product creator, I go, don't come on my webinars because you will hurt conversion rate. And they would, right? But then I also hurt their feelings. And it didn't matter that I made them $7 million. Their feelings were hurt. That was worth more than 7 million. So then they would find other people to do business with. They wouldn't make
Wow.
as much money, but they would feel
Hmm.
better about it. And my dumbass is thinking they're the wrong ones. I was the wrong one because that's not how the world works. So now I'm still not that good at it, guys, but I'm better.
Well, speaking of posting, you've been dropping some fire. I know I get your emails, the newsletter, and the stuff that I'm on Facebook. So I see what you're dropping on Facebook. Where if people want to kind of follow you and get to know more, and by the way, you should. We didn't. Jason is such an enigma. Like we didn't even get into the monk stuff and all that. I mean, this could have gone all different types of ways. But if people want to learn more and follow you, where should they go?
Yeah, they should get my book on Amazon, One to Many. It's a webinar book that has all the psychology and persuasion put together in a system.
And Jason's stuff works, and he gets hired by the biggest names in the industry. He's worked with Alex Hermosi. He's featured in Alex's books. He works with Dean Graziosi and the others that he mentioned, and so many more. And hopefully some of you guys could get to work with Jason too. But pick up his book. I've read his book, incredible. I'm going to read it again probably after this interview. In fact, this interview could be a book on its own. I think it could be a course that we're not going to put out on our podcast and then sell for a lot of money, because I bet we could sell it, especially Jason, if you pitch it for us.
Hell yeah.
But we have so much more to talk about. We'll have to do it again another time. We'll leave it at that for now. Jason, thank you so much for coming on.
For real,
My
bro.
pleasure.
Peace.